Hamdan Mostafavani of the Courrier International, the French weekly that brings you the best of all the international press in French, and Nicholas Norbrook of the Africa Report, who's here on the closing deadline day.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Let's get back to the issue of Iran that we were talking about just before the break. And I wanted... Earlier, Amr was talking about social networking when it came to Syria. And we know that in Iran, Hamdan, in 2009, that's where we really discovered how social networking can have an impact, how you can have a leaderless revolution. Now, we've had, in the last week, an Iranian cleric saying Facebook and other websites that promote immorality are sinful. And this week, the Iranian government announcing that a new, I guess you could call it a national intranet system, will be ready by the Persian month of Khordad. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Roughly in 5 months' time.
Yeah. The truth is, the Iranian bloggers, they were really the first ones to be very active. It started in 2002, 2003 maybe. So, and the government was always late. They couldn't curb them because they didn't have the technology, nothing. And then with the help of China, lots of help of China, they managed to try to I don't know, to speed up, to catch them and to be able to curb this community of bloggers and really very active.
We've seen the crackdown, and we've seen how it's intensified even in the run-up to the legislative elections. But can they really shut down internet?
I think they can, yeah, because now they're taking a new step and they're trying to cut cut from the World Wide Web. It's also to curb the Iranian opposition, but it's also to stop from the cyber attacks that, like Stuxnet in 2010, that really caused great problems to the nuclear program. So that's the double issue they're trying to deal with.
Judy Grunstein, do you see this happening?
As you were describing it, I just had this flashback to my childhood during the Cold War, and was trying to imagine what the Cold War would have been like had the internet existed at that time. It seems to me that there's a certain point where you can't just stop and tell history to stop. And you can try, and I think technologically it's possible. They can achieve it technologically. The problem is there will always be someone who will find a way to connect to the outside world, to get a message out, to get a message in, to get goods in, to get goods out. The age of isolation and of containment, I think, in all but the most broad way, is over. You just cannot wall off a country and a society anymore. The bonds are just too interconnected.
We saw that happen in places like Tunisia, which had been locked down for decades. Egypt, which also they had very strict laws on the movement of information, and there all it took really was a few months of people sharing and then realizing that they weren't alone, which instigated a bit more bravery, and that roll-on effect was incredible. At the same time, the Chinese have been, I'm not surprised that you said the Chinese have been the ones to bring this technology to Iran. Country of over 1 billion people, they've been extremely good at preventing online political communities from gaining any traction. And part of the way they do it is by flooding the internet with fairly mindless blogs about consumerist things or small popular items on football, etc.
But actually, in the immediate aftermath of the first Egyptian uprisings, Egypt actually did close off the country to the internet. There was, and it lasted, I think, 2 or 3 days because it put the entire financial network and all the banks into utter havoc and chaos. And when you see what's just the threat of isolating the Iranian central bank, what that's done to the Iranian economy, the idea that you can wall off a country at a time when it's information as much as goods that are driving economies, I think, is unrealistic. It's unsustainable. It's technologically possible, but theoretically unsustainable.
Let's talk about that impact of the threat of sanctions, what it's done. The value of Iran's currency sliding some 20% last week. Annual inflation has been revised upward to some 40%, according to analysts. In light of all this, I want to ask you, Hamdan Mostafavani, Do you think President Ahmadinejad is regretting last year's lifting of fuel subsidies at the pump, which had long existed in Iran?
I think he might regret it when the election time comes, which is in 1 month, because people are really were really disturbed by this measure, because everything, and now it's even more sensitive, because now everything is too expensive in Iran, and they really can't afford anything, and oil is one of them. So, but you can also say that they were saying that by cutting the subsidies, there would be great strikes, great demonstration, but still nothing happened. So
they did pioneer quite an interesting cash transfer to the poorest families.
Yeah, they
something
did.
Which
Yeah,
Nigeria, I'm sure,
they are
about
still.
It didn't do at
yeah,
all.
because we are saying they lifted the subsidies, but Ahmadinejad is still giving money to the poorest family.
You mentioned Nigeria. Right now, it's over that issue. People want to explain to us, first of all, returning to 65 naira a liter. What does that mean?
Well, it went up from 65 to well over 120, 130, sometimes up to 150.
A doubling, but it's still a very,
doubled, yeah.
very cheap gasoline.
It is, but there were plenty of people who went home for Christmas, and 1st of January happened. They removed the fuel subsidies. They couldn't afford to get the bus back to their place of work. It really, given how poor most Nigerians are, it really hit a lot of people extremely hard. Now, when 65% of your daily income has to go on food, and the impact of fuel rises on food prices, suddenly everything else is squeezed out. You just to put food on the table. Forget educating your child. You just won't have enough money. So whereas in Iran they made sure the very poorest families had these cash transfers, in Nigeria they prepared nothing at all. I'm not surprised that we're seeing the scenes that we're seeing.
Why did the president bring this to a head now?
It's very strange. The economics add up. The central bank governor has been very didactic about it, and he's tried to explain that a lot of the corruption in Nigeria happens around this fuel subsidy, which benefits a tiny elite who set themselves up as petroleum importing companies, get fraudulent paperwork stamped at the dock, sell the stuff in the rest of the sub-region, and get paid the subsidy, and also sell all this petrol they had. So it made sense in the long run. But politically, it's been handled extremely, extremely poorly. There was a consultative process which was underway. Members of the House of Representatives were meant to come to some kind of agreement. Instead, he just went ahead and did it very brusquely while everyone was on holiday, and he's reaping a whirlwind of discontent.
All right, and the president, some have called this a seminal moment for him. He'd just recently been elected. He's trying to make a mark. Talks continued this Friday to try to ward off a strike in crude oil production, but the outrage is real.
Our mandate is that federal government reverts back to 65 naira, and then anything will follow. And our belief is that there must be a platform where you have a holistic look at the whole issue of subsidy.
A holistic look at the whole issue of subsidy. Judah Grunstein, we talked often about the curse of oil, that you suddenly have all this oil wealth, and then it somehow creates these huge imbalances in the economy. Could you say there's a curse of fuel subsidies that goes along with it?
Absolutely, and I think that this is sort of like a quiet story over the past year or so that's going to increasingly emerge. I mean, in South America, last year there were riots in Bolivia, there were protests in Chile. Both countries had to. I know that Bolivia had to pull back and backtrack on the ending of gas subsidies. I believe Chile did as well. This question of the persistent poverty throughout the world. Even though there are success stories, even though there are in the data, when you look at the broad data, there is an increasing middle class around the world. there still is this persistent poverty that depends on government subsidies that in effect become this vicious cycle of dragging down the country's economy. So there's all sorts of structural reforms that have to be implemented, and the question is how to do it, both politically and technically, so that it doesn't actually just end up being a big hammer blow on top of all the other challenges that this sort of global impoverished class faces.
All right, Michael on the France 24 debate Facebook page, Michael from Harare says the issue is not about the subsidy, but the oil wealth. With all the petrodollars Nigeria has, it still hasn't gotten any meaningful development. Infrastructure is collapsing, and it can't even refine its own fuel. That's a burning question on many people's mind. Nicholas Norbrook answering it for us a moment ago, saying, well, there's a few people who get money coming in and get money going out with commissions. And that's how you can explain how Africa's biggest producer of crude is forced to import 2/3 of the gasoline it sells at the pump. It's quite an amazing figure. Do you have those kinds of figures in Iran?
It's the same in Iran. There's no refinery in Iran, none. So they have to import.
And there are people who get a little commission when the
of
crude goes
course.
out, and a little commission when the refined oil comes in?
That could happen.
The shocking thing is Nigeria has 4 refineries, of which one is working at about 10 to 15% capacity, and all of the others are not working. And it's sabotage. If these were working, then there'd be no reason to have to import, and so you wouldn't have these convenient little loopholes for corruption. But I think, and we're talking about the economic impact of fuel subsidies. It's true, but you have to look at the other things which are dragging down the country. And when you have a Nigerian senator earning $1 million US per year, when Barack Obama earns 400,000 US, you start to get a vision of an incredibly bloated House of Representatives, and you can see this at the state level. And I think they should look at other ways to save money first.
Who had a better year, though?
Yeah, you can even look at now, if you will, at the spillover effect. Now, nestled next to Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation, is Benin. There you see it, that little vertical strip there, a small former French colony. And since gas there is most certainly not subsidized, it's always a short jaunt to get some across the border and sell it, as you can see, by the side of the road. Now, since the start of the week, the locals have been feeling the pinch just as hard.
Before, fuel used to cost 350 francs. We now buy it for 800. If you charge 400, sometimes customers refuse to pay because they're used to paying only 200 francs. So we're forced to overload the motorbike by taking 2 passengers to the same destination before you get out. The situation is very serious.
2 people on the back of the Vespa there, Amar Abed Rabo, you could sort of feel it when you're in that part of the world, this sort of the spillover effect of Nigeria.
Exactly, but for me, it looks like just the AAA story. It's the drama of liberalism, where you can sell, you can buy, you can make commission, etc., etc. So it's, unfortunately, it's everywhere in the world. We were talking about Syria. There are the same problems almost everywhere. Not the curse of oil, of course, it's much more money. But sometimes it's about cigarettes, sometimes it's about alcohol or whatever. I mean, you name it, wherever it happens.
Before we go, the question we're asking, and we're at the midway point of January, is the Republican race for U.S. president already over? As the campaign moves to South Carolina, with opponents divided, Mitt Romney in the driver's seat after winning, well, the only 2 races so far, Iowa and New Hampshire. Of course, some have not given up the fight yet, but if you can explain to us, Judah Grunstein, this cartoon by Eric Cagle, someone saying it's not over, there's still a chance, and next to him is a fan of the Chicago Cubs baseball team. Maybe you can explain to that, who people who aren't American.
The Republican Party this year is the primaries are just a fascinating spectacle, because you have a real cleavage in the party between the base that has usually been mobilized using certain rhetoric, but the base has adopted the rhetoric as its own and has sort of believed what was really just supposed to be campaign rhetoric and wants anyone but Romney. And the elites of the Republican Party.
But they can't agree on who?
Well, it's not even that they can't agree on who. It's that there isn't any other credible alternative. The other people that are running are not credible candidates, whether because of incompetence, whether because of their past, whether because they just don't have the charisma or the machinery and the funds. So you have the elites of the party that desperately want Romney to win because they know he's the only one capable of putting on any kind of campaign that could make Barack Obama uncomfortable, and the base wants anyone but Romney. And so
anyone but Romney, and some have not yet given up the fight, by the way. Take a look.
Massachusetts moderate Mitt Romney. He'll say anything to win. Anything. And just like John Kerry,
Laissez les bon temps rouler.
he speaks French, too.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Mitt Romney.
But he's still a Massachusetts moderate. And a Massachusetts moderate cannot beat Barack Obama.
That ad courtesy of the Newt Gingrich campaign. Speaking French, Nicholas Norbrook.
That guy, he won't lie down and die. It's incredible. I mean, I'm sure Barack Obama is hoping that the Newt show keeps on going, because if there's one thing that it's difficult to do for Mitt Romney, it's to run as the candidate of business in a year where people are suffering because of what they see as the excesses of capitalism, and suddenly you have people pulling out all of the people who suffered at the hand of Bain Capital, where Mitt Romney worked. It's an incredible spectacle.
I just want to say I have a soft spot for Mitt Romney. I find the transparency with which he panders to the electorate somewhat refreshing. Because most other candidates do it, but they try to hide that they're doing it. The fact that Romney has so obviously transformed himself from a moderate Republican from Massachusetts into this sort of fire-breathing monster of the Republican Party, I find it's almost endearing, and I want to see him win so that he continues along the trail.
And hopefully it'll be an entertaining fall and it won't be too boring. Judah Grunstein, I want to thank you. I want to thank Hamdan Mustafavi, Amar Abed Rabo, and Nicholas Norbrook, and thank you for being with us here for The World This Week. Stay with us. Coming up next, it'll be Business, hosted by Marcus Carlson.